Welcome to the riskadvisor.com podcast. I'm Sal Lafreri. I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Jim Henry. Before we begin, we're going to like to remind each of you to subscribe to this show and to push the like button for us. We're going to ask you to leave your comments as that's really important for us. So today's conversation, we want to talk about lighting. We're going to take a little bit of an in-depth view on how critical lighting is to security and especially video systems. Jim, we've come a long way in lighting. Give us some thoughts, give us some feedback. I mean, you come back from the days of tubes and cameras, so we got a long way to go and a whole long way to explain about cameras and lighting and how technical it's gotten today.
Well, we've come a long way in lighting. We've also come a long way in camera technology. What we haven't come a long way with yet is the culture of marrying the two. So, hopefully that will be what we focus on here in this session. It's been 50 years since cameras were first introduced, as a tool for security systems. But one fact is, unfortunately, still a constant. Without light, there really is no video. And beyond that simple reality, the issue of lighting type, intensity, placement is often ignored or not given afforded adequate consideration in the design and implementation of security systems. And it really is a shame because that is a simple way to really get the horsepower and the capability, out of your video systems. So, today we are honored to have Eddie Reynolds, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Illuminar, as our guest. Eddie has been in lighting her whole career and is truly an authority on where the technology has come from, where it's going, and how to best marry and support video systems with lighting technology. So, Eddie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate you having me on your show today to discuss this very critical part of a surveillance system, which is lighting, which, as you said, Jim, is often ignored.
I'll kick that off with really the first question with what the problem is that I identified. So with lighting being such a critical driver in the performance of video systems, why do you think lighting is so often excluded from the designs and scope of work for video projects?
Many answers to that question. Starting out, as I've spoken to you gentlemen in the past as a systems integrator, I never specified a job without lighting. And this was in the 90s, mid-90s to 2000. Then I got on the manufacturer side and learned about lighting in 2000. So yes, for the past 21 years, I've been focusing on lighting in surveillance. What I found was that people are afraid of lighting, okay? I know that sounds weird, but with their surveillance systems, they've become afraid of lighting because they don't want to get a hot spot or the lighting's not covering enough on the horizontal to match the field of view. So again, you get a hot spot. So what happened is camera manufacturers started to make cameras with LEDs built in. And so that has caused people to not think, and I'm not trying to be rude or mean about the industry, but basically they're trying to take the fear factor out of lighting and just have people install surveillance systems without thinking about what they're doing. So you have these cameras with the built-in LEDs, and because they can see a little bit at night, the camera manufacturers say, oh, look, with our cameras, you can see in 0.000, 125 lux. However, when they're doing demonstrations, most of the demos are in the daytime. So if your cameras do so well at night, why don't you have any demonstrations of your cameras performing at night? So for me, that is the issue, is that camera manufacturers, number one issue is camera manufacturers always tout how wonderful their cameras perform at night and therefore have brainwashed the industry in what good surveillance systems look like.
Well, it's also a clever way for them to kind of address the challenge with architects when you start on a project where you start to place lighting. They start to have heartburn about intensity and the look of it and and the illumination, and it's just all about, the aura of what they're trying to create in a mood, if it's a lobby or,
right.
Even in a building, perimeter. So, by building the LEDs into the camera, I think, the camera manufacturers figure, okay, we'll avoid that, that quagmire, we'll just sneak them in here, into the camera housing, knowing, they're very limited in what kind of an illumination that can, that can provide to assist the camera. But it really comes down to, again, culturally, bridging that gap, that divide between the architects and their control of, of the environment, for the owner, and security. And I think there's also a problem where the security departments of buildings, they don't necessarily want to involve, the facilities folks and whatnot. And then they become a decision maker, and the stakeholder. And, two wrongs don't make a right. This is a case where 3 and 4 wrongs certainly don't make a right. But holistically, there really is so much to be gained by having appropriate lighting to enhance tremendously the performance of the security systems, that we really need to find a way to break down that that barrier.
Sorry, education, and also to your point, Jim, and that is very true. Education is key, because with most things, people don't want to specify something they're not familiar with, they're not comfortable with. So if you educate them and get them to understand and see a before and after shot, then they become less intimidated by the lighting.
Right.
Well, you look at construction projects, right? And you look at some of the stuff we've been involved in over the years. The operations folks, the people that are going to run the building, run the systems, have very little input, if any, in the beginning part of it, in the initial design. And that becomes a real problem, because there's no input capability at all. Nobody's even addressing that and talking about that. And then all of a sudden, where you would normally have a stopgap, where somebody on the operations side would say, "Hey, how's this going to work at night? What are these issues we're going to contend with?" Doesn't even get the opportunity to ask the question.
Right, and a real soft spot here for our audience. Beyond poor image quality, poor lighting hurts you in the pocketbook, because beyond the poor image quality, poor lighting creates a lot more noise in the image, and therefore the video that is being recorded onto hard drives takes up a lot more space. So security systems, with poor lighting, typically need a much more significant investment in the storage costs. And if that money were put into the lighting, it would actually give you better performance and save you money. Generally, when you get both of those, that's a win-win.
And I have this on my website. Is there any way we can show this, or you want to show this later? Because, of course, I have some on-off pictures that show static and then show one with lighting on.
You can show the screen and it'll come up. Yeah. While she was looking for it, one of the things that, in the pre-production meetings when we were chatting about how much storage it winds up using, I had never heard that conversation ever had before. That was never a consideration.
Yeah, and one of the examples, a previous conversation, I said, we had cameras, and in the early days of video in elevators, and in order to save money, typically the buildings would be shutting down the lighting in the elevator when the elevator parks itself down in the lobby and it's not in use, and yet the cameras are left on and continuing to run. And they're struggling with their AGC on to try and get an image, and it's just filling up the hard drives with all sorts of, dead air. And, when we saw that, we went, we've got to address that. You've either got to be, shutting them off with timeouts on the motion detection, or it's a lot cheaper to leave the lights on in the elevator and even taking, intermittent snapshots. So at least you're time stamping the fact that truly the elevator is unoccupied, and you're validating that there's nobody that's in the elevator or stuck in the elevator,
Sal, can you
there's a lot of those stories.
Okay. So what we were discussing, this particular shot right here, okay, where before you have this grainy image, and then you have You have the image with the light on. At any rate, here is one that we were talking about that Jim specifically talked about. And this just looks like a black screen, but basically it's a camera with no lighting. And when you're doing storage, you're just storing this grainy black image. And then on the right-hand side is where you have one of our lights. This is a lot different. This is the kind of video that you want to see when you're playing back your video. And plus you can capture somebody with this type of video. You can see what's going on in the scene, and you should be able to always identify what's going on in the scene, okay, instead of just the messed up images. Again, here's some more on the left-hand side with no lighting, and then look on the right-hand side. Just by adding a light, look at all of the details that you get to see in the video. And this is the same thing that we should expect from our surveillance cameras as we do with our cell phones, when we're doing any kind of professional photography. Every single industry that has to do with cameras always has a class on lighting except for security. And I find that so strange because we want to capture people doing bad things and put them in jail. But if you have poor images, how are you going to do that?
Well, that's a very helpful. Let's take a break here, and then we'll move into the next segment, where we'll get into a little bit more of the logistics of the different types of lighting technologies that are currently available now that we've moved into the wild world of LEDs of all sorts of different color temperatures. You are listening to the Risk Advisor podcast, hosted by myself, Jim Henry, and Sal Lafreri. We invite you to comment on our blog, theriskadvisor.com, and subscribe to this show. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So continuing on our dive into technology here, can you educate our listeners on the state of the art now with lighting technology for both security and for security in both the visible and the non-visible spectrum?
Yeah, so LEDs have become stronger and less expensive, but still give you lower running costs than, as we had discussed before, Jim, the high pressure sodium and those kind of lighting, the high pressure sodium and most other lighting gives you color temperature rating of like the 33, 3200 or 5500. So you get some skewed colors. So that's why some people, when you're talking about lighting for outdoors, okay, they like to use infrared because you get skewed colors. Well, with LED technology and color temperature rating becoming very critical, we have what we call our white light illuminators, which are these here. And the color temperature rating that we use, or the Kelvin, is 6,500. And so with 6,500, it's similar to natural sunlight. So when you see a picture on your surveillance, the whites are white, the oranges are orange, the yellows are yellow. So you don't get any skewed colors. So therefore, you're not just stuck with just a black and white picture 24/7. You can have the same color picture at night as you do in the daytime now with using white LED technology. And again, you got to look at the color temperature rating of the LEDs in the fixture.
And this is, I think, becoming more commonplace to even the novice that is not a lighting engineer, because you go into, whether it's a Home Depot or whatever now, and now that LEDs have really come into their own, you can see the displays of the incandescent replacements that of the daylight spectrum, or they have the warm light spectrum. So I think this is much more understood now by the average person, about the different, color temperature ranges and how that now relates to what we're talking about here for camera systems.
Eddie, I got a quick question for you with regards to that for, again, the novice person, the CEO, the C-suite person who's listening, who's recognizing this as a possible issue or something to pay attention to. With respect to analytics, so you have some of the analytics that are out there now, you can go in and say, give me a guy who walked in and had a red baseball cap.
That's right.
How I'm the guy here who tries to be the non-technical and just kind of keep it down, to the dumb level, right? At the 5th grade level. So
that's a good question, though.
But so it is systems that they've spent a ton of money on that has piss poor lighting on the overnight. That capability no longer existed for them. It doesn't exist for them unless they have the proper lighting that gives them the true color that they could go to, correct?
Sal, you hit the nail on the head. So for video analytics, and again, like you're saying, when someone says, I want to catch the guy in the red shirt, okay, during the daytime, you're going to have that. But if you don't have proper lighting at night, one, you're either not going to be able to see because you don't have proper lighting, or number two, if you just have infrared, everything's going to be gray. So how are you going to distinguish that? And again, that's where white light has become more popular. So our white light sales have picked up as of last year because a lot of data centers are using white light illumination. People are using white light illuminators just to light up an area because it is a low cost. Our housings are IP67, so they're good for cold, for hurricanes, things like that. And they've got a 5-year warranty. So basically, they just plug and play. So you can just install it and forget about it. But the key is to make sure that we specify the correct model for your application. And I think that's, again, where people get scared because they just think that I'm just going to stick a light here. And if the light is not properly installed or specified correctly, then it's not going to work properly and they get scared. It's just like if you go to a Mercedes dealership or you go and buy a Nissan, in your Mercedes, it says you have to use premium gasoline, right? And on your regular car, you can use regular 87 gasoline, right? And I'm just trying to give a scenario. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to use lighting for your surveillance system, you want to use the proper lighting, just like you would use the proper gasoline in the car. You would not put regular gas. You would use premium gasoline in your Mercedes, right? So we're talking the C-suite. Most C-suite people have those kind of cars. So this is where I can get them to relate. You're not going to use regular 87 octane gasoline in your Mercedes or Tesla or whatever and get the best performance.
If you put it in the Tesla, you'll have a real problem.
Exactly. You have a real problem. So that's kind of where we go.
Sal, that example that you talked about trying to follow somebody with a particular color of article of clothing or a hat. Another problem that you can solve by having the continuous white light, is a situation where if you are moving, around a building or through different areas, they go from white light to orange light to, mercury vapor and this high pressure sodium and all of that. Now, some cameras have a pretty good capability in what is called auto tracking white balance, where it adjusts itself to that lighting and attempts to still make whites white and other colors their proper colors. But not all cameras are very good at that. So
and how much are those cameras?
You could really get thrown off by somebody, moving, from one lighting scene, into a one lighting condition into another. The camera doesn't have time to adjust yet.
That's right.
And if you're trying to track somebody in a crowd, you've lost them because that color is now gone.
That's right. And again, if you're using those kind of cameras probably cost, I don't know, $10,000, $15,000 per camera. They're very expensive. So again, you can use, one of our illuminators and you have an MSRP cost. Our most expensive one is $1,700 and it's going to cover a wide range and it's going to be able to track with constant color the whole time that person moves from one screen to another. So again, you want to specify lighting to match the field of view of what the camera sees. Because a lot of times people just say, I just want to flood this area with light. But if you're using it for surveillance, now if you're just using it to flood an area with light, that's fantastic. You can use it. It's still lower running costs. If you're using it with surveillance, remember the camera's only going to see what the camera's going to see. So if somebody gets out of the field of view of the camera, we're not going to be able to track them or see them. So you want to make sure that we're not overdoing it with the light for surveillance and just flooding an area if the camera's not going to be able to capture every area that the light, where the light is. So that's also somewhere where people get turned off by lighting because they put too much light where the camera is only capable of seeing a certain thing. So if I put lighting in the back of my head, I'm not going to be able to see what's back there, correct? Unless I have my phone looking behind me or a mirror. And so again, you don't always have to flood an area with light. You can, if you want to see a small area, you can put a small light there. And the light doesn't always have to be exactly where the camera is. Again, as we had spoken about, if you have a blackout in your area and your neighbor comes out with a flashlight, you can still see that flashlight. The camera can still see lighting off in the distance and still identify what's going on. So those are just some of the things that, again, educating people and getting them, taking away that fear out of lighting from them. Or they're thinking about, well, how much is this going to cost me? It's going to cost me a lot of money.
Well, Eddie, a couple more points on the technology here before we take our next break. So some of the other slams on why lighting was not considered, as part of an overall design, beyond the cultural aspect of it being a different group generally that's in charge of that. Another concern, by end users was the ongoing cost to, for the lighting, electrical costs and maintenance, because, the parking lot lights and what have you, or lights up on buildings required maintenance. They required, bulb replacements and whatnot, and maintenance crews, to be able to get to those. So can you bring us up to speed now on the life expectancy and the level of maintenance now on these new LED solutions and how much more economical they are to run?
So again, as I was saying, the lighting that Illuminar makes, so this is our infrared. This is 850 nanometers. So going back to the technology, this is a slight red glow that we're seeing here. And this is an all encased housing. So again, as I said earlier, you can just plug and play. This is good. We have a 5-year warranty on this. So there's no maintenance cost. It's just installing it and leaving it, and that's it. The light's going to come on at night because the photocell is built into the unit, just like the automatic lights in your car that sees dark. The photocell senses nighttime, and then the light comes on, and then when it's daytime, the light goes off. Okay, that helps eliminate dark spots. And also, when you have a regular bulb, just because that bulb goes out doesn't mean that they're going to change that bulb right away. So how long is that part or that area where the light's out compromised? Whereas if you use, our lighting, again, you're good for 5 years, right, at least, because that's the warranty on our products.
And that's the same for the white light, the visible light, as well as the infrared. Yep.
All of the visible and invisible units that are made in the UK are 5-year warranty.
All right, we'll take a break at that point and then come back with discussing a little bit more in detail about these solutions that that Eddie has referenced. You are listening to the Risk Advisor podcast, hosted by myself, Jim Henry, and Sal Freri. We invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and to subscribe to this show. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up.
So if I go back into my video gallery here on our website, what we're looking at here is basically on and off. And this is the kind of quality video you should be seeing. I know so many times I've gone into head ends of people's surveillance systems, and the video looks nothing like this whatsoever. And the people are so proud of their surveillance system. They're like, look at our cameras, look at all. And I'm looking at it from my perspective and going, that looks like crap. If you want to try to prosecute somebody, you're not going to be able to do it because you can't recognize what's going on. But again, it's just educating people on the type of quality video that they should be seeing. And that's just always the deal with illumination. Okay. And then as far as integrated cameras or cameras with built-in illumination, this is one of the problems. It attracts insects. You have spiders building webs on the outside of the lens. When you ask me about maintaining the light, what about maintaining the camera? Okay.
No, it's a good point. Yep.
So when you see this, if somebody comes to the left-hand side and try to break in, you're not going to be able to see anything. You're just getting that reflection back into the camera of the spider web. So how often are they cleaning their cameras? More so than the lighting. The light, if you're using regular lighting, that light bulb will go out. But the camera, that if you don't have the camera, you're not going to see. And of course, if you don't have the right lighting, you're not going to see. So that's the main thing. And here is the picture that we talked about in its full thing with the static. So another outdoor scene, you should be able to see what's going on 24/7. You should not compromise the quality of your video surveillance by skimping on not adding lighting to your system. And here's a white light with all true colors. As you can see, the snow is white, the sidewalk, you can see red, yellow. There are no skewed colors in this whatsoever because the LEDs we use simulate natural sunlight. So you get the same picture in the daytime, at nighttime as you do during the day. I mean, look at how clear this video is.
Yeah, years ago, before LEDs, in order to get that kind of color temperature, you'd have to go with like a metal halide or something like that, very expensive, or or halogen, very expensive to run, and also the life expectancy of the bulbs was limited. So this is a great advance that everybody should be taking advantage of.
I mean, you could even see the boxes in this warehouse. You could see some of them are open. You can see the doors. I mean, you can describe what is going on in the picture, and that's what we should be doing all the time with our video surveillance.
So you mentioned that education is really the key.
Correct.
Let's focus on how we can break down that historical separation between, the lighting projects and the facilities folks and security. Are security consultants a key to communicating that, and the ones that are writing specifications now for projects to ensure that lighting is part of the overall program?
I believe it's a mixed bag, honestly, Jim. I believe that there's so many different sectors. You have A&Es definitely are very important because they're writing specification, right? So if an A&E, if a architect, engineer person, a consultant is writing a spec and they're leaving out lighting, they are doing a disservice to that video surveillance system and to their customer by not adding lighting. But again, it's all about what you know. So a lot of those consultants sometimes aren't familiar with lighting either. So they just leave it out because they believe the camera manufacturers that say, we have built-in LEDs, that's sufficient enough. And so they'll write in, the camera has to have this and this kind of LEDs, blah, blah, blah. But you also have the systems integrators, which I feel is they should know more because they are right with the customers all the time. They're constantly getting training and reps are constantly visiting them. So again, it's a combination of, yes, me as the manufacturer, but if I hire a rep firm to represent my brand, how well are they speaking about my product or saying, hey, Eddie, we need to do a training here. So it's all about education because you only know what you know. You don't know,
I can certainly
put it in there.
Yeah, I can certainly speak from my 50 years as an integrator that some of my brightest moments, pun intended, as an integrator have been to illustrate and to educate our customers how much we could improve their systems with lighting, right. And in many cases, how much money we could save them,
yes,
with lighting. So for integrators, it truly is an opportunity to earn your place as a trusted advisor.
That's right.
By providing a solution and an economic savings to your customer, at the same time.
And one of the things also, as you said, Jim, which brought this up for me, if you bring it as a total solution. So a lot of times we have people And we do. We're getting new people in the industry all the time. People are waking up and saying, you know what, today I want to go in the security industry. So we get a truck slammer or whatever's going on. They have no idea about security. Hey, I was one of those people. I sold hair and skincare products before I got into this industry. A far cry from what I'm doing today, right? But I had to learn, and I only learned by either on the job or talking to other people in the company. Mainly, I would spend a lot of time in operations. This is when I was a systems integrator. I spent a lot of time in operations learning about what was new. How can I improve this for my customer? And that's why I specified lighting with most of my systems, because I went to operations and just sat with them and put systems together. And at that time, operations knew that lighting was important, because if they didn't have lighting, then they would have a lot of maintenance calls going out because the cameras didn't perform well. Now, I don't know what's happened these days, why I'm not going to put everything on ops, but I just don't know where the disconnect has happened. But again, Jim and Sal, I appreciate you guys bringing me into this kind of format to educate people that, hey, you know what? The chips on the cameras have gotten smaller. We have IP with the CMOS. We need lighting more than ever. Because back when I was doing cameras, we had 1-inch CCD chips, 1/2-inch CCD chips, and the lighting was still inefficient with the bigger chips. So I can't even imagine now what it's like.
No, the tools are definitely much more advanced than they were years ago. The cost point has come down. The life expectancy has gone up. So there really is no reason other than lack of education. And like I say, some of just the natural historical traditions,
Yes.
that lighting is in one portion of a construction spec and security is in another, and
or they feel like it's in the camera. Or they say it's in the camera. And that my biggest competition or my biggest nemesis is lighting that's integrated inside of a camera. That's the biggest issue we have with surveillance, is because people just feel like, oh, well, it's already built into the camera. I don't need to sell lighting. I've heard that so many times. And I'll send them the video or image gallery and say, does your video look like this? Oh, I didn't know it could look like that. Well, there you go.
Well, there's always going to be that person that's out there with their phone camera, that's out there on a beach on a quarter moonlit night, and they want to take a picture of something 1,000 feet away from them, and they go, oh, wait a minute, let me put my flash on my camera,
That's right. That's right. So as you said, if lighting wasn't important, they wouldn't be built into every single cell phone, okay? Because how come cell phone people know that lighting is important? I mean, I don't get it.
Right.
Now, I have to say, I remember the first version of the cell phones that came out did not have LEDs built in. And I thought, well, that person is not familiar with people of different color spectrums, because when we would take pictures, it's me, because it's just this factual, really, you would just see my teeth. You wouldn't see me, right? And I'd be like, well, I'm there. You just can't see me because there's no lighting. And then the second versions came out, and then everybody started putting LEDs in their cameras because they realized without lighting, there's no video.
Right. But again, these LEDs are so frugal power-wise. The amount of the intensity that you can get, from them at a very low power draw, has really increased the versatility of where these can be embedded.
I'm going to turn on the white light, so you guys have seen this, but so this is the white light illuminator.
Yep.
6500K, and this is at 20%, so it can get brighter than this. But yes, the bright, and again, to be fair, when LEDs first came out, they weren't that bright on the white light part. But of course, that's changed. They've become more powerful using less LEDs. So actually, on our models, we're using half of the LEDs that we used in our first generation of products and getting longer distances with them and still maintaining a 5-year warranty. The LEDs we use, the Osram LEDs we use, Osram is made in the type of LED we use is called Osram. They're made in Germany, and they're specified to last 50 to 80,000 hours. 50 to 80,000 hours. You're not going to get that from a regular incandescent light bulb or halogen light bulb. And we talked about fluorescent, and fluorescent light bulbs are actually bad for your health. They give out radiation, and they actually interfere with your internet, with your Wi-Fi systems. I don't know if you guys knew that as well. So there are many, many, many advantages of using LEDs versus fluorescent. And we talked about also when that fluorescent bulb goes out, where do you put it? You're not supposed to put it in the garbage can, but is there a fluorescent landfill somewhere? What do you do with that? Well, with LEDs, you don't have to worry about it. It's going to last you a long time.
Right.
And it doesn't get hot. So I can keep this light on, as I've done at trade shows for 10 hours, and I could still pick it up like this with it being on the whole time. I don't need an UV glove. It's not going to burn me because LEDs don't run. They do run hot, but we do have heat sinks on there to help keep it cool and last a long time.
Eddie, how do people get in touch with you?
So they can get in touch with me. They can use our phone line, which is 281-438-3500. They can also email me at sales, SALES, at Illuminar Inc. And that's ILUMINARINC.com. Illuminar means to light in Spanish. So there's only one L. So, or they can just go to our website, www.Illuminar Inc. Again, ILUMINARINC.com.
We'll make sure that we have links to in our show notes on our website. We'll have show notes and we'll have links to your site and some of the PDFs and some of the videos you've posted up.
And I also want to say, Sal, that if anybody wants to get in touch with me, please call if they want to have do a training, a webinar. I'm happy to do that one-on-one with a group. If you need me to help you specify lighting, I can also help you turn any camera into a license plate capture camera. You've got to make some adjustments to your IP camera and dedicate a camera to license plate capture. But if you have a specific camera brand you like and specific software, so that way you don't have to get an expensive all-in-one proprietary system, I can help you with that as well. So not just for surveillance, but license plate capture as well.
Cool.
Oh, great. That was very informative. Eddie, we thank you again for being our guest today on the show. You have been listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by myself, Jim Henry, and Sal Lafreri. We ask you subscribe to this show as we always would like to have new subscribers. We remind you and ask you if are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. Remember, you can hear the show on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, and of course, stream it at theriskadvisor.com. Thanks again for listening and hope you tune in again next week.
Thanks, Eddie.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.
Now more than ever, it's critical that customers find accurate information about your business. Local Works by Yahoo Small Business makes it easy to add, edit, and publish business information across 70-plus local directories from a single dashboard. Ensure your business is found with Local Works and save 10% today by using code LWPodcast. Visit yahoosmallbusiness.com/local to find out more.
Did you know that your local grocery outlet is independently owned and operated by folks in your community? Unlike traditional grocery stores, this allows us to better serve our customers and the communities in which we operate. We support local schools and charities like helping fire departments with toy drives. We also donate thousands of items each year to food pantries in your neighborhood. Stop by your local grocery outlet today and see what we've been up to.